Hello, my dear friend. Welcome to another episode of the Reflective Parenting Podcast. My name is Cindy Hovington and I'm your host. I am a mom of three from Montreal, Canada, and I have a Ph.D. in neuroscience. And my goal here with this podcast is to make sure that you as a parent feel seen and that you start to build or work on your feeling of confidence, knowing that you can tackle any chaotic moment as a parent. And that includes all of the things that lie outside of those interactions with our kids, including our in-laws. Today, we are talking with Dr. Tracy Dalgleish, and I've had her on the podcast before with her first book, and she is now a second-time author. Her new book allows us to understand the dynamic of you as a wife, your husband, and his mom, because that dynamic can become very complicated. And so we are going to be talking about that. Tracy mentioned something in the podcast or during our conversation that I think is really important to highlight a little bit more before we start the conversation. So, if I were to ask you, what are your two core values? What would you answer? Sometimes people don't know, they have no idea. And sometimes parents will tell me, well, respect is important and kindness and integrity and authenticity. Sure, all of those are important, not denying that. But sometimes they are things that are important to us, and other times they are truly core values. And when something is a core value, we come back to that every single time we need to make a hard decision in the moment, like setting a boundary with somebody or speaking up about something during a conversation or knowing when to leave a room with our kids. And other times, they are the sort of guiding compass that we have that allows us to sit down, maybe with ourselves or with our partners, and say, okay, these things are important to us. How do we come back to that in this decision that we need to make? Sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes we need to be flexible on that or our core values. If our values are different than our partner's values, for certain things, we need to find a happy medium. But core values are truly important. And Tracy mentions that during our interview and our conversation. And so I wanted to make sure that you were aware of how important it is. In fact, it is so important that it is the first chapter of the new course that I released called Becoming a Reflective Parent. Many parents have already joined. And I'm so excited for that because I do want you all to see how important knowing your core values is for you. So many parents are just snapping so easily and feeling triggered all the time and feeling overwhelmed and stressed. And we look towards a very quick fix solution, and that doesn't exist. The moments when you are snapping at your child, there are lots of external factors that we don't realize, which is why I wanted to share the science with you and break this course down into 10 steps. And these 10, not 10 steps, sorry, 10 skills. And these 10 skills, including emotion regulation skills, self awareness, your values, your identity, your conflict resolution skills, your leadership skills, your ability to reflect, your ability to look at systems thinking and look outside the box. These are all skills that will help us in the moment and help us realize that there are many more variables. And so if you'd like to give it a try, the course link is in the show notes. If you are done with snapping or feeling stressed and overwhelmed, it is time to take this course. It is self-paced. And taking away the club will no longer exist. It is not a weekly thing anymore. There will be a cohort starting in the new year, but for now, just focus on the course. We only accept people in the cohort that have started the course. It is time to do the work, and it's 20-minute audios that you can listen to. All right. Besides that, if you, my dear parent, are somebody who does struggle with snapping and you're like, what in the world is going on with me? I am giving a free workshop this week. And if you want to receive the replay, because I will record it and send it out to those who are registered, or if you want to join me live and understand the science behind why we snap, and I will bring in some tools for you to help you through this holiday season. It is the right time to get those tools and skills. You can click the link in the show notes and register for it. Again, you can join for free live on December 17th, Wednesday at 8 p.m., or you can just receive the replay if it's important to you. It will be about 30 minutes. I'm going to keep it short because we're all busy and it's the holidays, but make sure that you subscribe to that. All right, I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. I first just want to thank the Tannenbaum Open Science Institute and the McConnell Foundation for supporting this podcast. And thank you my dear listener, for being here, for supporting me and this podcast. And I hope that you are learning something by listening and joining me every single week on Mondays. Make sure that you share this episode with a friend or a family member that you've heard them talk about these struggles they have with their mother-in-law and their husband. As always, I want to make sure that I bring in both sides. And so if you are a father listening to this, I think it's important to listen to what Tracy has to say. She works with couples. She is a couples therapist, and she has done a lot of the research and has a lot of the data from the couples that she's worked with to give you the tools. Her book offers you the right tools. I'm going to put the link to her book in the show notes. It is so important. And I will also put the link to her previous book that I keep referring to. Both of her books are books that you can keep on your shelf and keep coming back to. And if you are a couple struggling with this, it is time to sit down. It is time to work on this together. It is not you versus them. It is you together, and you will get that by the end of this episode. And that is all I have to share with you. Thank you for being here. Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast. All right, that is all I need to share with you. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with Tracy as much as I did. Welcome back, everyone. And as promised, here I am with Dr. Tracy Dalgleish. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for having me here. It's such a gift to be back and to sit with you and your community. So thank you.
Your first book has been so helpful to us. And this book is even, I did not anticipate this as a second book. And, I always start by asking where the idea came from. And I have a feeling, I'm assuming this was something that you were hearing a lot in your practice.
Yes. Oh, Cindy, I have spent nearly 20 years working with people and couples specifically. And every couple comes into my office wanting to get on the same page, whether it's with communication, intimacy, finances, and to really be able to solve those problems that show up. And every couple that comes in says, we have a desire to have healthy relationships with extended family members. And repeatedly, I found myself not having a resource for this specific dynamic. And it was just the resource specifically, and we'll talk more about why this dynamic specifically, but between the daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law, because we know from the research that there is higher conflict between these two versus, say, son-in-law and mother-in-law. And I've walked through my vault method. So my book, You, Your Husband and His Mother, has my 5-step vault method inside of it. And what I love about this is that it's not about just telling someone what to do. It's about really aligning together and getting on the same page so that you can feel good and feel empowered during the holidays. And I've seen some couples do this, and it's just incredible.
Well, that's why I'm just so happy that we're talking at this point, because the holidays are coming, and that's when, it gets a little bit complicated. But I am curious because you are, like you said, it was specifically on that dynamic. What is different in that dynamic between the son and mother versus the daughter and mother or father? Like, why that specific dynamic?
Yeah. So let's first think about, and I have a son. So I have a son and a daughter. So I think about how my relationship is different with both of them. And so when you look at the mother-son relationship, it is the first demonstration of what it means to love, right? And so if a mother does not have an identity outside of raising children, then her son goes to another partner in a hetero relationship, goes to another woman. And then that becomes his secure source. And so then it leaves a mother wondering, what role do I have here? What role do I get to keep playing in this family? And for some people who maybe feel more insecure about their role changing, then that stirs up tension and the insecurity. And the tension also, Cindy, this is such an interesting piece where we think about almost like this cultural moment that parents are having today, which is one of the reasons why I love what you do here on the podcast. And it's recognizing that we are parenting differently. We are showing up in our relationships in a very different way. We no longer want to do all the kin keeping. We don't want to be the ones to hold everybody together. We want to divide the visible labor and mental load more evenly. We're showing up in workplaces differently. I mean, here, you and I, it's 4 p.m. I had to shuffle my kids out with my husband after school. Like, you have to get out. I have a meeting, right? Like, it just looks different today.
Yeah.
And so anytime someone does something different, it leads someone else to ask, is what I did wrong? Or it could be perceived as a threat. Well, if you're doing it this way, does that mean that the way I did it was bad? And
Right.
it's not. But unfortunately, then here we are showing up saying we know more and we want different. And that can then sometimes start the tension if people are not able to have these conversations and to show up wholeheartedly into, I think of an emotionally intelligent mother-in-law showing up saying, wow, this is really hard. We always do Thanksgiving on the Thursday, thinking of the US listeners. And you're telling me this year you're not coming. And well, I'm having a lot of feelings about that. And I'm going to turn you two towards each other because that's what's important. And that's what healthy families do. And we can talk more about that in a bit. But that's really the key piece here.
What you just described is what we want. But it's so
Yes.
hard sometimes, right? Because again, it's like your title, right? It's me, it's you, your husband, and your mother-in-law. And you feel often like you are in the middle of them, right? Because if you are saying, well, maybe it's too much this year, maybe traveling there, and then going to my side or whatever it is, it's just not going to work. We need to see if we can do something different this year. And you say it first, then you are creating that boundary. You are the one ruining Thanksgiving or Christmas
Well,
this
like,
year,
quote, ruining, right?
Yeah, ruining. Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
only saw one hand up.
And
Yeah, and
there's
that's hard.
the piece in here too where we think about generational differences. When I talk to boomers, for example, the baby boom generation, they'll say things like, well, that's just what you did. So Christmas is happening and we're going to pack up the 3-month-old and the 2-year-old and the dog. It's a snowstorm because here we are in Ottawa, Montreal, and then we have the Christmas gifts in the trunk, and we're going to go and drive 8 hours down to Southern Ontario through the blizzard. But you just did it every year. That's what parents did. And today, parents have more stimuli coming in. They're overwhelmed. We're burnt out. We're crispy. We're trying to navigate what it looks like to parent our kids in a different way, to then even do some of the reparenting with our own parents, but then also ourselves. And many people, for a lot of different reasons as well, based on connections and contacts, we're choosing to do things different. And it's not bad. And I think that's the really big piece here is that families need to remember that your relationship is not hinged on one holiday event. Right? Because it's wobbly and you have all of these other ways of connecting and building a close bond.
It's I think about something you just said, the identity, right? And thinking about, again, us being parents, trying to do things differently. One thing that parents really struggle with is setting boundaries already on its own, never mind just being with in-laws. Like, just boundaries itself are really hard. And lots of parents who have young kids are learning how to set boundaries for the first time. But now you're doing this with your in-laws that you want them to like you. You don't want to be the disliked daughter-in-law. And so it's really hard in those moments, especially when they're giving you unsolicited parenting advice and you're trying to figure out who you are as a parent. Maybe you have a very young child, a baby. I've seen it even in my family. On my side, you get so much advice and you're like, I don't want to do that. I remember my grandmother saying, if you want your kids' legs to be straight, you need to put the baby upside down and let them hang a little bit. It's like, Grandma, I really appreciate it, but I don't think so. Don't touch my child. But coming from your side, you could, say what you want to say. When it's on the other side, it's harder to speak up or say, I don't think so, or I don't agree with that. And so how do you navigate that, especially for new parents that are getting all of this unsolicited parenting advice from somebody who might mean well, but sometimes it gets heavy and you don't know how to set that boundary yet. You're not there yet. How do you navigate that?
I'm going to answer that, but I want to first point out something you're doing right here, and we have to name it, is that so many daughters-in-law get stuck in victim or villain. It's like this binary. And the victim position is, I please, I don't speak up, I don't assert my boundaries, I'm caring, I'm putting everyone else's needs first. And she often ends up getting resentful over time. I talk about 3 different daughter-in-law styles inside the book. And so then that's the good girl daughter-in-law style. Then villains. The villain is you set the boundary and then suddenly you're the scapegoat and you're the reason for changing, on quotation marks, changing everything. And villains then are often, I talk about them being managers. They're the manager style where they have high rigidity, high control. Not a bad thing because we need those at times in our life too. And really the premise of my book is about you taking a seat at the table. I love the expression of like main character energy so that you can show up in your family with your children and feel good and solid. You use the vault because that's going to keep you protected inside your house. And then you can go to family. Is this somebody who can hear and receive a lot of information or not? Is this someone that you want to deepen a relationship with? Or are we just trying to maintain status quo? Can this person also do some self-reflection around their impact and not just on attention? So anytime we go to boundary setting, think first, who am I dealing with? And then a key part of boundaries is really about first reassuring somebody. Your grandma, you're important here, right? Or we know how important being with the kids is. And then being able to set clear, concise, and so simple to say it. And this is where adults, I find, really trip up on boundaries compared to children. Because, this morning I asked my daughter, can I play Legos with you? And she said, no, I'm good. And like, that's her need. No, I want to play on my own. I'm good. Like, no, thank you. You ask a child, do you want a hug? No, I don't want a hug. And
it hurts.
well, of course, right? But there's this element here where as adults, we do all of this mental layering in there. We have to start justifying things. We have to then give all the reasons and explanations.
It's true.
And, let's give an example of sleep. We're not going to have those conversations with certain family members because they want to argue with us about why we're choosing what we're doing. Well, in our day, we just put you down in your crib on your stomach. Don't do that. And we walked away, right? So today, that's not what we do. That's not what the research shows. And so then let's say your mother-in-law comes to you and says, why are you doing that for sleep? What's going on? And the moment you say, well, let me talk about the research and I'll tell you about what I read. And here's this Instagram post. This is why we're doing all those things. You've just given her permission to go into this conversation with you. Instead of being able to say, we're choosing what's best for our family. This isn't something we really want to talk about. We know you love being grandma. Have you seen the new bath toys we got? You can use them later when you give little baby a bath, right? Like that right there is just completely moving past it. It's not, why would you ask me that? How dare you? Why can't you just respect that I don't want to talk about sleep? Because that's not a boundary. But the boundary is, what am I willing and not willing to do?
Right. Which people often mistaken, right? It's often we perceive it as what I'm saying to you, what I don't want you to say or do, but it's not. It's what am I willing to put up with or deal with, right? It's on us. Yeah, I'm happy that you said that. I love that you're starting off with thinking about that person because we often don't do that. And there truly are some people that we can, say certain things that they will reflect on what we said and really maybe, try to take on our perception or understand where we're coming from. But then there are the other ones that it doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter how calmly we say it. I was looking at a study, it was coming out of Pakistan, but it was a study that looked at mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, mother-in-law dynamics. And they said that in some of the cultures, education level also plays a role, right? So do you think you know more than I do? Are you better than I am because of your education? And so I'm thinking of that specific person as well, that mother-in-law. It doesn't matter what you say, regardless, they will perceive it as an attack.
Yeah.
And so what do you do if you have, let's just use the situation that you explained, and you calmly set that boundary, you haven't been disrespectful, mother-in-law walks out of the room, you're putting your baby to bed, it's the holidays, and they go see their son and say, your wife was so disrespectful to me right now, or they start something, and it doesn't matter how nicely or calmly you say it. How do you deal with that more difficult person?
It's my hope, and especially when people get this book, because it's going to help them work through how to be on the same page. And
Mm.
here's what I say in the book is that family members are predictable and consistent. If your
Hmm.
mother-in-law has previously gone to your husband and said something negative about you, chances are that she might do it again. Like,
Mm-hmm.
pretty good in that sense. Unless your husband has stood up for you, et cetera, that would be different. But then how do we prepare for this? And so couples need to spend time talking about ahead of these holiday events, what kinds of things are we looking at? What's really important for us? How do we want to act at this holiday event? And then what does
Right.
that look like?
Mm.
And then this is where a couple needs to be a solid team. And
Yeah.
ideally, that person's partner says, Mom, don't say negative things about my partner. You're allowed to be upset by something like that. I totally get it. And it doesn't help to say those hurtful things to me.
Mm.
Right. And that, unfortunately, Cindy, what ends up happening is so many couples come to my therapy room because they haven't been able to be on the same team. Because this
Right.
is
Which I want to get
then
into. Yeah.
where he falls into the family system that he's in.
Right.
And so he doesn't stand up. And maybe he makes excuses for mom, or he doesn't even respond to mom, and then goes to his wife and then said, next time don't do that. Mom was upset
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or the other thing I hear is a lot of dismissing and denying that happens between couples where
Yeah.
one person says, your mom said this, it was really hurtful. And then her husband says, it's not that big of a deal. That's
Mm-hmm.
just mom. And
Yeah.
for anybody listening, first, if you have received that, I want you to know your feelings are valid and it would make sense to feel hurt. They're almost like death by 1,000 paper cuts. Most
Mm.
times I hear the layers of criticisms and hurt and guilt trips, and it's not most cases where a mother-in-law barges in and is physically abusive. That's not
Right.
most cases. It is the emotional digs and hurts and
Mm.
almost that like psychological warfare almost
Mm-hmm.
that can show up in families. And so first, for people listening, I believe you. This has not been an
Mm.
easy journey. And someone recently found my book in my Instagram space and sent me a DM saying, thank you. I finally feel like I'm not crazy.
Right. Yeah.
So there's that first piece. And then the other piece is,
Mm.
okay, you two need a system. You need to do this work together because we don't want family to penetrate a marriage. You need to be a solid team. And I say to men, here's the thing. You are not being asked to abandon your family. Your family is important. And we need to first choose to prioritize the family in your home, the chosen family that you have,
Right.
the emotions and the needs with your partner. And then when you are solid and on the same team, that's how you bring in other family members.
Mm. Let's bring in that husband. There's so many angles to this conversation, which is why I love the triangle also on the triangles on your cover. But so now we've shown how you can start setting boundaries and you can understand this other person, your mother-in-law, and how they deal with certain things. But now I guess the rule we have in our family between my husband and I is you deal with your family, I'll deal with mine. So any no for my family comes from me and no for his family comes from him. And anything that comes up, it's always we deal with our own family. But is that the best way to do it? Because then you're never the one communicating. And what I understand a little bit in what you just described is maybe I should be setting the boundary. I should be speaking to, my mother-in-law when there's something to be said. Is that a mistake that we make sometimes by putting the onus on our partners?
That really depends. Because if you are getting into these escalated arguments, if you're continuing to be made out, they are continuing to make you the scapegoat,
Sure.
then your partner needs to step in. And it's tricky,
Right.
Cindy, because in those conversations, we don't want your partner to go to his mom and say, Mom, Tracy doesn't want to come for Christmas this year. Because
Yeah.
that is the splitting between you and partner. And you go to your family instead saying, this is the decision we're making. We've decided to. Oh, thank you for that invitation. I need to check my calendar and then we'll get back to you. So it's very much this like we perspective. And for some families, Cindy, you could go to your mother-in-law and communicate that. And same with your partner, vice versa. It's tricky. And I think something too, though, is like when we start bringing in all of these other family members, I think the main goal that I would want listeners to hold in mind is we don't want any behaviors that are splitting people. So
Right.
if mom or sibling or brother or uncle, whoever it is, comes to husband and says, I want to have this conversation with just you. Are we protecting the family? Are we protecting the marriage? Who are we protecting? And
Yeah.
it's tricky because we don't want to abandon, like truly, I have not had any daughter-in-law show up in my office with the first thing saying, how do I be estranged from this family? How do I cut off these people? And of course, when we go to estrangement and cutting off, we've tried and tried and tried. And that's really tricky.
Yeah. Most of us want to solve that, right? We want to have a good relationship with our in-laws. And so it's really important to figure that out. What about, at the beginning, you spoke a little bit about the identity piece that comes into this, son-mother relationship. What about on the other end, with husbands, let's say, who might really struggle to set boundaries? They don't want to disappoint their mother. They want to make sure she's happy, and they do feel that's their responsibility, and that's what's causing a lot of the issues. So they're not standing up for you. You feel like you're on the other end of this, but on the other end, they're saying, "But I'm always taking sides, and I will always take my mom's side." That becomes really hard, and I've heard moms who are struggling with that. How can we start having now the conversations between us and our husband in terms of like what are the next steps for that?
Mm-hmm. So I would say grab my book, and I created these 5 things from Dr. Tracy in the back. It's for your husband. You could almost like tear it out and say,
So good.
here you go. This is for you.
Yeah.
Because I knew I had to write something to
Mm-hmm.
that partner. And it's hard, right? Because I think Cindy and you and I talked about this with my other book, is that there are times where people are so resistant to doing this work. And you
Right.
have to
Yeah.
almost like pull them along. And one of the first things I say to people, to men specifically, is when you do nothing, you are part of the problem. You are
That's hard
not.
to hear sometimes.
It is so hard to hear. And
Mm-hmm.
you are not being put in the middle. You are not being asked to abandon your family. But you have to understand that you are part of this dynamic. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really where step 3 of my method is important. And it's intentionally that it's step 3, because step 1, we highlight values. We really understand who you are as a couple. Step
Yeah.
2, we go into your aspirations. We go from 35,000 feet in the air of, yes, family is one of our values, to now ground level. I just had an expecting mom send me an email saying, I went through your list of questions from step 2, and they've already helped me and my husband have these conversations, because you don't know the questions you should be asking. And
Yeah.
I can admit that as well on our own postpartum journey.
Mm-hmm.
So then step 3 is intentional here, because if I started with limits and boundaries, which is step 4, most people shut down when you say you have to set a boundary with your mother. No,
Yeah.
shut down. Yep.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, I'm
true.
going to get defensive. I don't know what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
No, there's nothing wrong. Shutting down. So in step 3, this is about you understanding what that triangle looks like and how each person's relationship is impacted throughout the things that are happening, or even through the absence of things.
It's interesting that you mentioned values as the first piece, because I think Brene Brown came out with a book, and I think there's a focus on values as well. I've been helping parents for the past year through our membership, and I've put values as the first piece now after doing this for a little while, because I felt that when I was talking to parents specifically, I would ask them, what are your core values? And they say, well, loyalty, honesty, whatever, all of those things. Great. They're absolutely great. But are they your actual core values? And now you're coming into this dynamic, into this relationship. And that's what was causing a lot of problems. What are my values, and what are my partners? And also, what are your family's values? And sometimes there's a disconnect in that. And so you're going into a home with, let's say, with your in-laws, where values are very different than yours, and that's really hard. Is what was the reason for starting with values? Is that because of the disconnect that can happen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you need to
Interesting.
be grounded in what really matters to you. And it's
Hmm.
interesting, many clients, when I sit with them and I ask, what are your values? People will say, values? I don't know. And
Yeah.
And that is an interesting piece when we don't slow down and pause.
Mm,
And this element here, when I work with clients, I integrate acceptance and commitment therapy interventions, which very much is about how do we live aligned with what matters most to us and
mm,
acknowledging what we cannot control. And I really love having couples ground themselves in their sense of togetherness because we
mm,
come to this conversation so heated, already on opposite sides, that we need to find that space. So can we
mm,
identify what matters? What's our North Star? And then I often found that with people, we would say, okay, the family matters. But then what did that actually look like? One of the couples I share in the book is how one partner wanted to go to his mother's house every Sunday for espresso and biscottis. And now they have kids. And she's like, well, 7 p.m. on Sunday doesn't work. So can
yeah,
you tell your mom no? Or just once a month? Like, I think she'd be okay.
mm,
And he wouldn't be willing to change that. So their values were aligned, but the actual, what are those actions to move forward, were at a complete mismatch.
mm. I'm glad that you have put those guiding questions in your second book because that was the piece I loved the most, the reflection prompts in the first book. Because sometimes we don't know how to begin and we don't know how to have certain conversations. No one's taught us that. And so I'm glad that you're doing that. So, walk us through, you've mentioned the steps. Can we understand a little bit more about what that looks like? And maybe that's going to help us also understand, like, yeah, once you have the values and now you've had certain conversations and the boundaries, what is it? What are the steps that we take?
So the book is divided into two parts. The first part is really about insight and understanding. So you're
Mm.
going to learn what type of mother-in-law you have. I always say this is not a diagnosis, but understanding a category of behavior.
Yeah.
In chapter 2, we're going into your family dynamics. And I list out how we get here and 10 common toxic family dynamics that show up. In chapter 3, this is where your baggage is showing up. You are opening up your
Mm.
suitcase and looking at what are some of the wounds you bring into this dynamic. We have to do that self work
Yeah.
and also our own expectations that show up in this relationship. And
Mm.
then in chapter 4, this is your jam packed, and you know this, Cindy, but it's a packed full of my best relationship communication. It's the whole thing in one chapter
Mhm.
as best as I could, but I know so many people already have told me how much they love learning their infinity loop and what those core emotions are and like just
Mm.
how can you tweak that communication piece. So then in part 2 we do the vault method. So V is values. A stands for aspirations. The other thing I love about aspirations is that because I know so many people act on autopilot in their family systems,
Right.
I've actually helped people identify when are you in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and what
Mm.
can you start doing differently so you can be engaged in these conversations and engaged. I think of one client that they would get on the same page, they had values aligned, they didn't want to deal with the guilt tripping comments, they would land at the in-laws house and then he'd go into complete shutdown mode. He
Right.
wouldn't set the boundaries, he'd go on autopilot, he didn't even hear the comments.
Mm.
So that's a really important piece in step 2. Step 3 is the understanding your triangle. Step 4 is limits and boundaries. And
Mm.
I love this chapter because first, boundaries. Like we really need to get clear on what they are. But I give readers 3 key things that you need to set boundaries as a couple. The most common thing I hear is, I wanted him to set the boundary and he didn't. Of course, he's in the family system, right? And so I talk about willingness, importance, and ability. And then the fifth step, sorry, is take action. So how can we then actually put this into action? And I go through my 3 steps. So the book is very step based. I had one person tell me recently that even though she's not having problems with her mother-in-law, she's taking the whole 5 steps and having a marriage summit. They're going to go through it. It's just going to be great.
Yeah. Well, so I'm thinking about the parent now who's heard all of this and like, okay, great. But what happens? I haven't read it yet, and now I need like an emergency plan for, maybe it's the holidays coming. They're going to get your book, but by the time they get to the end and kind of process things, it's going to take a little bit of time. Is there a guide that you can offer us in terms of when you leave your in law's house and you are completely dysregulated, you are frustrated, you are upset, it happened again, your partner didn't set the boundary, your mother-in-law was disrespectful to you, and it's the same argument over and over again, and you feel like it's on repeat, and you say, you didn't speak up for me, you didn't say anything. And kind of like the example that you just said, what comment? What do you mean? Oh, it's not what she meant. You know how she is.
Oh, it's the
And
cycle right there,
yeah,
right?
yeah. How do you, I know there's a lot of steps, but maybe there are things we are doing wrong in those moments. I'm assuming already that you do this all the time. Like, what are some, I guess it's even conflict, tips in those moments where we're just so mad that it's happened again and it's always the same situation?
Hmm. You are the first person to ask me this specific question, and I absolutely love it because it's just this, we can predict when this happens.
Right. Yeah.
And I often think about what can I do within my own control? And then
Mm,
how do we remain a solid team? Because
mm,
nothing will get resolved if the back of your brain has gone to the lizard brain, if it's
yeah.
firing red and that's all you see. So that's not going to be the moment that you go into these conversations. And
Mm,
instead, it's going to be about how do we feel close and on like as this solid unit. So for yourself, what do you do afterwards? Okay, she did it again. You have all these hard feelings inside of you. Can you shake it out? So I'm kind of shaking my hand. So, you think of like you're in fight or flight. How do you bring your body down? I had one client that it would be really helpful for her to take her hand from her shoulder all the way down to
mm,
her fingertips and almost like, okay, not my monkey, not my
right.
circus. I'm like releasing it here. I'm leaving it here. One other one would sit in the car and she'd push her feet into the ground
Mm,
and she would take slow, deep breaths, just knowing they're not going to get anywhere in that exact moment. And this is okay, we're just after the holiday events. We're not going to get
yeah.
through it, but it is about you now taking time to understand what didn't feel so good. What is the bigger goal here? And then what do I need to communicate to my partner? And when we communicate that to your partner, hopefully you get to the book parts of this, but part of
Mm,
that is if you go in saying, your mother is crazy, she always criticizes me, she has absolutely no respect for me, you are attacking her character. You are
right.
instantly rising your partner's defensiveness because what do we all do? It is so human and natural for us to do this. You protect your parents, you protect your childhood, you protect your memories.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
instead, we
Mm,
have to practice, okay, what did I feel and what did I need? And how do we do that together? And then when we think of next time, how do we then set the boundary? And I think it's so important then, are we removing ourselves from the situation? If people start to swear at the dinner table, is this the moment that I stand up and I take the kids and we go for a walk and he stays there? What is it that we want to do in those moments? So that's the kind of
right.
planning part that comes next. But I use this analogy. Well, I talked about these three things around
Mm,
repairing after hard moments with a client recently. And
mm,
he just said, I feel so disarmed, like in a good
mm,
way, instead of
mm,
this like heightened and like, because I think the reality too is even if your husband says it wasn't that big of a deal, that's just mom, he still feels it because as soon as you're upset, he senses it.
right.
And
And they're going to
you
have their coping skills around that.
Absolutely. And you know
Yeah.
that from the parent-child relationship is that
Hmm.
we can sense these things faster than we can put words to it.
Yeah. True.
So
Mm,
he's whatever seat you're in the car, but he's feeling it. Put your arm on his shoulder. I'm so glad we get to do this together.
mm,
Or you express gratitude of saying, you were attentive to me during this time. Thank you for getting me water and making sure I had my plate while the kids were also being fed at the same time. Like just something as a handle to
yeah.
grab onto to bring you back closer together. Number
Mm,
one priority, we are close together.
right.
I
Is
think
that
we lose that.
And is that something we should follow for any argument or conflict? Like that
Oh, yeah.
connection piece first? Yeah, I like
Always,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love if you're having one of those really intense conversations and you can stop it at any point and say, okay, wait, hang on. We're not getting anywhere. I need a break. I want us to finish this, but my body is so overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
can we go for a walk and just hold hands? Don't
Yeah.
talk about it. Don't keep going into it. Let's just go for a walk, hold hands together.
And I know that there are moms and dads that listen to this podcast. And I know that dads that come into the Reflective Parent Club often talk about like shutting down unwillingly, or that it's just one of their coping mechanisms and they want to end the conflict as soon as possible with their partners. And they really struggle with that piece. So I know you've spoken about vulnerability and shame and how that can show up as well in terms of anger and shutting down and being dismissive. Do you think that's part of it as well? Is there a vulnerability and shame around this particular dynamic of, dealing with your wife and your mom?
Yeah. Oh, of
So it
course.
falls into this too then. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like if we can say, okay, I'm feeling like I'm just not getting it right now. And that's totally stirring up my shame
Right. Yeah.
and I'm wanting to be defensive. So what I do right here, so for people listening, this is what we would call walking around. We're not going into it. We're walking around it. And it's
Mm,
really powerful to say to your partner, my brain has gone fuzzy and I can't think straight. I need to have a break. Because
right.
it says to your partner, I'm not just leaving you.
Yeah.
I need to tend to myself. But we come back to this. And for those who shut down, you have to practice the strategies. Your partner needs you to, your children needs you to. You can
Mm,
do it with your kids as a start and then you do it with your partner. It's the how do I calm my body? What helps me to stay grounded and soothed? Is it about
mm,
us holding hands while we talk? Is it about, you know, putting hands on heart together? If your partner puts their hand on your heart, is it taking 60 seconds to look into each other's eyes? I love getting couples to do that one in my office. They absolutely hate it. And
I was just gonna say,
oh
I
yeah,
I
so
could
the
imagine.
one I had, well, several, but I remember
Yeah.
one where we put their foreheads together and they were allowed to look into each other's eyes and they're like, "Gosh, this is so awful." And then at the same time, they came out of that exercise having not talked for the week. They came in angry at each other. They came apart from it and they were both tearful because they
Mm,
connected to the vulnerability within themselves and
mm,
their partner. And this is what these conversations are really about. And you know that from my first book. It's all about what's at our core. And whether it's your mom, if it's about sex, parenting, finances, at our core, it's like, are you choosing me? Am I important to you? Because when you say to me, it's not a big deal that my mom did this, I feel completely unseen. And I just need you to see me.
you're right. It's yeah, that piece, I just need you to see me. And it's on both ends, moms and dads, that will
Absolutely.
kind of communicate that in different ways.
Mm.
I want to focus a little bit more for a few minutes on the dad, or the husband, just to understand maybe what you've seen or heard, right? Because we've talked a lot about like how the wife would feel in these
Hmm.
situations. What are you hearing from the men in terms of how they are experiencing this on their end? And, you know, uh, do they feel like they're stuck in the middle? Do they feel like they have to choose sides? That's how we see it, we feel on our end. But what does it look like on their end?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuckness.
Hmm,
I don't know how to do this. And the easy road is to keep mom happy.
right,
And that's interesting because that pulls on old coping mechanisms
right. Oh,
rather than
easy.
being able to assert yourself to mom and to enter into conflict. And I think a lot of this taps back into fear for
Hmm,
men. And what's the fear about? And that's something for people to kind of ask themselves, what is it that you're afraid of? And I
hmm,
think of one client, we really identified this fear of losing connection and not being able to know what's going to happen in the outcome. And that was incredibly tricky. Like I don't want mom to be upset with me. What if mom gives me the cold shoulder? What if
hmm,
mom doesn't talk to me for weeks? And it's kind of this like, well, you don't get to choose that, but you
right.
now have to choose your family.
Hmm,
And you have to look after what's happening here because, and especially for dads, I say this, your children need to see you doing this.
yeah, they really do. It's just so important. And that assertiveness, it's interesting because I've heard this from a dad or two that talked about having trouble speaking up to their own mother and struggling with assertiveness specifically in that dynamic, in that relationship, whereas they were better on the outside, but not with that particular person, their
Mm,
own mom. I think of also people who have brought this up, and there was a cultural piece to it. So certain cultures live with their in-laws, and so with their parents or in-laws. And so that dynamic of daughter-in-law and mother-in-law, it's always there. They're always commenting. They're taking
Mm,
over your parenting. They are still the matriarch of the household, taking care of everything, whereas you are just there to support them, but it's them with you and your family. And that becomes really hard. And then on the other end, the dynamics again in certain cultures where you don't set boundaries with parents because it's considered rude and disrespectful. And so that is why the husband will not speak up, because he will be perceived as extremely disrespectful to both parents. How do we
mhm,
move forward with different cultures being aware of that, feeling like I don't have the right to speak up? I need to let, I can't, I live with her, right? There's nothing I can do. And so
mhm,
setting the boundaries, like we spoke about at the beginning, is even harder.
mhm. This is really the goal of the book, of helping people to see what that is for them. And once you
Mm,
go into the values and aspirations piece, then what does the boundary actually look like? And again, it's this reminder too for people that to express something is not to hurt someone or to completely change a culture. It's to say, this is what works best for us right now.
right. Yeah.
And I won't speak for, I always recognize my bias and who I am. And I think it's so important for people and their families to find what's going to be best for them. And sometimes, depending on who you are in a relationship with, that does mean going to mom and saying, we are deciding to raise our children this way. We want you on board with this, and we're going to be doing it this way.
Mm,
And then the other piece is, I mean, how do you choose to sort of coexist within that
mm,
without trying to necessarily change the system? So
right.
what I think of it often like a boundary fence, or the fence rather, a gate opening and closing.
Mm,
What are you allowing in, and what are you going to close your gate to? And there
mm,
might be certain things that you choose not to take in. And, I think it's really hard if one of your values is to have your mother-in-law live in your house, or both in-laws live in your house, then how do you protect your own energy?
yeah.
And that is a lot of agency and choice for yourself, which
Mm,
is important, because
mm,
you might not change the hierarchy that's happening, but you get to choose for yourself. And again, modeling that for your children.
mm, that's so good. The last little piece is somebody online. So I posted on social media yesterday, what does your relationship look like with your mother-in-law? And somebody DM'd me privately and said, I just learned to pick my battles. Is
Yeah.
that the wrong way to go about it? Or is that
But 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 no, and I
no?
love that you're sharing this,
Mm,
because I think there's this movement. So my husband and I have been talking about this, and we've been watching the uptick of social media and how things are shared. I'm also a creator online. I'm also a psychologist. I've been working with people for almost 20 years. I've seen how we've been changing in systems.
yeah.
And I think sometimes what's happening is this is a natural overcorrection. We are like, "Ooh, boundaries. You can't say anything negative to me. You can't comment on my parenting at all." And we think that we can control others. And then we swing to the other side saying, well, if you keep saying these comments, you're out.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
why the connection to your values matters. So
Mm,
I don't think that this is capitulating, but I do think this is about asking yourself, and it's not, I'm going to reframe that I choose my battles, because, and I actually did this with a client recently. I had asked her instead, what really matters to you about
right.
Christmas this year?
Yeah.
Let's sink into that. What
Mm,
matters most to you? And so we described the holidays and what that would look like. And then we decided the critical comments, they didn't even have room in this like
mm,
value-based image that she had drawn upon. Okay, there's no room in there? Great. So when someone makes those comments, because they will,
yeah.
what will you
Exactly.
do?
Mm,
What will you do? Well, you know, those ones, I'm just going to let them go, because
mm,
that's about them and not about me. And
mm,
the other thing, I think this is one of the hardest pieces of work that we have to do today, and to not swing so far into necessarily cutting people out. And I say that with a caveat of saying, I understand why people get to where they do. And
yeah.
that's always a situation, it's dependent on the situation. But one of the most powerful things that people can do is to accept that someone else will never know your full truth.
I like that. And it's true. Yeah.
Only you and your partner, only you two will know the real strength in your marriage. Only you will know what you are allowing in
Mm.
and allowing out. And you two are the ones that tuck your kids into bed at night. You two are always their leaders, their guides, the secure bases. They're coming to you. You have that. And this is not an icky meaning of this, but that's the power within yourself.
Mm.
And that feels good.
Mm. Tracy, it's such an empowering thought to have, because I've spoken to parents who just feel like they're always justifying, right? Explaining themselves and trying to show that person, this is who I am. You've got me completely wrong. You've got everything wrong about me. That is not the picture that I want painted of me. But in the end, and what you've painted is that beautiful image of like you and your partner, you're in this together, and feeling like you can have that feeling together of that power. Tracy, I knew I'd have trouble stopping this conversation. Thank you for being here, Tracy, and thank you again for continuing to educate us both on social media and through the books that you share. I have always looked up to you and truly loved the content you put out there, so thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.